diskussionsförmåga så skickade vi Ylva till dem för att styra upp det. Stor applåd för Ylva Sundström.
Hi everyone, my name is Ylva Sundström, as Marcus just pointed out, and I am also a former student here at Uppsala University. I graduated in 2012, I think, and now I work as an art producer in at GameDuell in Berlin. GameDuell is a casual games company with a bit more than 200 employees from around 30 different countries in the world. We have Germany's largest platform for casual games called GameDuell.com. The company was previously oriented towards making browser-based games for the French and the German markets, but is now focusing more on mobile games for the global market. And I'm the producer in the mobile games department, where we actually just soft launched a game called Grand Gin Rummy. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I do later, but first I would like to explain how I ended up working with games. For me, working with games was never a childhood dream, and I would also perhaps not describe myself as a gamer exactly. Sure, I play games. I really enjoy Rayman Origins, for instance, and similar things, and I don't know how many hours I've spent playing Dungeon Defenders in co-op mode, or Heroes of Might and Magic 3. But I spend most of my spare time doing other things, however, like reading books, or watching TV, or going to concerts, whatever. What I'm truly passionate about, though, is making games. Even on my worst days at work, I don't regret choosing to do this for a living. It all began in 2008 when I was living in Berlin for the first time. I was unemployed and had basically no clue whatsoever what I wanted to do with my life. I was super tired of having little to no money, and I had spent many hours of my life working in nightclubs. I really wanted to work with something more giving than just pouring beers, having beers poured over me, and cleaning up after people. My only real requirement for a job at the time was to have a decent salary, that the job would be creative in some way, and that I wouldn't have to wear a uniform to work. I'd never been a good student in my life, so my grades were not great. My early dream had been to do something with psychology, but my grades were way too low for even something. It had taken me 3 full attempts to get a grade in Math B. The only thing I felt I was good at, and that I was actually already spending a lot of time doing, was drawing and managing my OCD. I decided that I would become a game artist. Applied to Gotland and got admitted. At this point, I had no real idea what a game artist did, nor did I reflect over the fact that the program I had been accepted to included doing a major in game design. That was all in the details. 1 week before I was moving from Visby to Visby from Berlin, the Gotland ferry crashed into the docks of Nynäshamn. I tried to not think of this as a bad omen. My first time at Gotland University, as it was called back then, was actually really great. I was super inspired, I really liked the education, and I really liked not having any tests. I also really liked that you could spend 3 hours in school just making paper prototypes of Super Mario Brothers. Although the prototype didn't turn out great, but... I even liked the game analysis. Although I've always been horrifically bad at playing first-person shooters on PC. So for the first assignment, my friend Sandra and I, who is a proper gamer, decided to play Doom 3. And I screamed so much that she had to take over for me and play while I would just take notes and look at her while she was playing. The only thing in the education that I started to get doubts about was if I actually wanted to be a game artist. 6 months into my education, I realized I was better at structuring Excel sheets, talking to people and driving projects, than understanding why ZBrush had just crashed for the 5th time. I hated working with 3D programs, and I still do. I was terrible at taking criticism on my art, and I actually didn't even want to become better at drawing. I just wanted to draw for fun. But I also realized that I was pretty good at making things happen, that I could keep an overview and not get stuck in details and understand the complex process that was behind making a whole game. I made a new life choice. I was going to become a producer. I still remember talking to a classmate who said that this was a really bad idea and that people didn't just become producers like that. Luckily, there were other people that saw my potential, like Albertina Sparhult, who was just here, who asked me during my first Gotland Game Conference if I wanted to do an internship at Digital Nature, which I did. And Adam Mays, who helped me get my second internship at SEAL, that later on became my first real employment as a games producer. And of course my boss, or my former boss, Robin Flodin, who partly annoyed the hell out of me, but partly was my greatest supporter during my first year. This is, by the way, what my first Gotland Game arcade project looked like. It was a game called Bedtime Gory and had 4 levels or 4 mini-games. The theme was inspired by the Grimm brothers' fairy tales. The game mechanics varied between the different mini-games, and the player input was a Wacom tablet and a Wacom pen. In the screenshots you see there, you were supposed to saw off parts of the foot in order to fit it into Cinderella's shoe. Just like in the original story. There was also another minigame where I think the players were supposed to eat themselves fat by, in a very rapid pace, take plates of food, all containing different amounts of calories, so that they, in the end, would be eaten by the witch in the gingerbread house. So, what I learned from that project was, don't ever do a game with a Wacom tablet, unless it's a drawing game, because no one will like it. Since then, I have released 2 large game projects, half a game engine, and worked on several more games, both for PC, console, Facebook, and mobile platforms. I worked with about 8 different teams in the last 4 years and a ton of people. I've been to Nordic Games, Swedish Game Conference, GameX, GDC San Francisco, and Gamescom, and met lots of nice, cool, and interesting people, of whom the most random one is probably Nolan Bushnell, the guy in the picture, who is the founder of not only Atari, but also Chuck E. Cheese. Today I work with a totally awesome team, and I have colleagues whose name you can actually Google and get something else than a picture of Donald Trump wearing a guinea pig as his hair, which is awesome to Google, so you should totally do that too. If someone would have told me back in 2009, when I did my first semester at Game, that I would get to do all these things, I wouldn't have believed them. So what do I do now exactly? A producer in the games industry can do many different things. Typically, when we talk of the producer, it is the person who is responsible for the vision of the game project. The producer is the one who communicates most with the publisher, if there is one. He or she is the person who writes down the milestone schedule and the one that makes sure that the production plan is there and will be executed. In time, on budget is the normal goal for any game producer. The first real job I had, while still being in school, was at SEAL Game Studio. At that point, I was a game producer and their only game producer. Most of my job consisted of making sure that the progress of the game went well and according to our milestones, and that we delivered everything to the publisher that our contract said. I spent a lot of time talking to the game director and the lead designer about that milestone schedule, writing new milestone schedules when we perhaps couldn't deliver, and communicating with the publisher's producers. I also spent a lot of time with the team, checking the progress of the game, making sure that we didn't have any problems that would hinder our progress. During my time at SEAL, I released 2 PC games for Steam from beginning to end. I worked on other games as well, but not through the full production cycle. Project number 1 was called A Game of Dwarfs. It was a strategy management game with random generated levels that had, as far as I remember, around 20,000 sales on release. This is not near good enough, but it's still far better than the other project we did called Starvoid. One of the biggest mistakes we made with Starvoid, and I'm sure that there were many more, was to not have any bots in the game. Starvoid was an online multiplayer game. So on release day, everybody in the studio, around 30 people, had to sit down and play together in order to keep the servers filled. So a game like this is absolutely dependent on liquidity to have players in the game playing all the time. And of course in all time zones. So as a studio of 30 people trying to keep this up for however long it was needed, maybe months, is not a viable solution. After having spent about 1.5 years, lots of crunch time, and put so much passion into something, we had to admit that the game wasn't a success. But despite a lot of stress and drama, I think that my time at SEAL was still a personal success and as overall a happy experience. Because I think that when you take on tasks that perhaps are a little bit too difficult for you, you tend to learn a lot from it. You also tend to learn a lot from stupid mistakes, as it's very difficult to forget them. And just like in any relationship, it also brings you very close as a team if you manage to survive them. The team that I worked with back then has grown a lot since then, and I would easily work with them again if I had the opportunity. Overall, I think it's that this is what people mean when they talk about failure as something positive. So that about covers what a game producer does, and now I will move on to all the other type of producers there are. Yay! So, in many cases, a producer can also lead other types of projects, like the development of a new game engine or a tool. A producer can also lead parts of a project or perhaps a whole unit of people, such as being responsible for the sound production. And this is the kind of producer that I am. At the moment, I am responsible for the art delivery at GameDuell. I am the art producer. On an average week, I spend about 50% of my time in meetings. The meetings are partly decision meetings, like how should we continue with the trailer project, who does what do person X from this team need from my team, blah 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 blah. The other part are meetings that are more related to planning and to making sure that the team knows what to do. Like the pre-planning meeting I do with my leads, our estimation meeting where we estimate the backlog, and our planning meeting. It could also be meetings that has to do with overall process changes or structures for the team that would make their lives better somehow, I hope. So, if there now is one person, or at least a half person in here that would like to work as a producer, these are the things you should know. Among the perks are, you get to meet lots of nice people. If you are lucky, you get to travel quite a bit. You also get to see your team being happy if you are doing a good job. If you are doing a good job, you might also get to release a lot of cool, nice games. If you have OCD like I do, you will have tons and tons of stuff to organize neatly. You will never run out of stuff to organize, ever. Among the negatives are, no one gives a damn what you do or who you are, but you will get blamed for everything that goes wrong. So, when everyone else is crunching and your job is normally done, I hope it's done because you shouldn't plan anything at this point, you still want to hang around and be supportive in any way you can, and at this point this means basically pizza delivery and QA. Nothing wrong with QA, but yeah. If you have a crazy art director, studio manager or game director, it's your job to yell at them when they are being mean to your team or your team members or to each other. even if they yell back, stop listening completely, or throw stuff at you or on the floor. You are the person who tells people to calm down, stop playing with the Nerf guns in the morning meeting, and to be on time for work. Also the fourth time this happens during the same week. You're the destroyer of all fun. Essentially, you are herding cats. If there is no team, there would be no producer. In total, GameDuell has 4 art teams. They are the production graphics team, the marketing graphics team, the illustration team, and the studio art team. The product graphics team was the first art team at GameDuell and makes art for our web-based games and all things related to those. I work with the 3 other teams. So amongst the small one are a marketing graphics team with just 2 people that deliver all the marketing art. They make content for the Facebook page, for the game's Facebook pages, for the game's web pages. They make the web pages when we do releases, and lots of banners. The other small team is the illustration team. They are 3 people, and similar to the marketing graphics team, they do non-game assets for special events and other large illustrative content that often is for our platform GameDuell.com. The team I work most with is our 15-person studio art team that delivers art to all our cross-platform games. This team has a wide span of collected knowledge, and thus between them everything from animations and crazy concept ideas to final game assets that go into the games. The studio art team was formed in September last year, and previous to this we had all the artists spread out across different game teams. So this approach is normally preferred, as it means that artists and developers get to work closely and communicate more. The problem was that in some periods the artists didn't have anything to do. So because when the art was done for a project, they were basically just idling. It was also difficult because of skill set. Some people are very good at making UI related work, some making illustrations and concepts, some have more experience from making assets, and some are more technical. Therefore we made the decision to take all the artists and put them in a bunch together. Let me explain this in a little bit more detail. So, the studio art team's purpose is to deliver something to a client. The client can be a game team or a marketing team or some other type of team. They're more or less a service team, and they're also a functional team or discipline-based team, like it's called here. A functional team is the opposite of a cross-functional team, meaning that the team only contains one type of resource, like programmers or artists. Functional teams are more common in AAA studios, where the productions are larger and there are more people working in total. And there is a bigger need for making lots of assets. My boyfriend worked as an art producer in China for a while, where the total amount of artists for one project was around 100. And they were also spread out in 4 different cities. Functional art teams, or functional teams in general, are quite untrendy in the rest of the IT world, as the communication chain gets much longer and therefore less efficient. And the work tends to also be a little bit more repetitive. So therefore you often mix teams up so that everyone in the team represents an important piece in the production and can make the game without too many dependencies to other teams outside, like you do here at the university. Our game production teams at GameDuell are all cross-functional teams, consisting of programmers, producers, designers, QA, and user experience experts. The art team is the only production team that actually consists of just one type of resource, and the engine team, of course. If we would include all the artists in the cross-functional team and wanted to cover all art in all projects at the same time, we would need a lot more artists. So instead, by just having an art pit where we all sit together, we can service the different game projects simultaneously. Depending on where in the production we are with each project, a different person might service your team with assets. The same artist often makes art for 2 projects at the same time, depending on skill set and how much work they have during that week. So, before I dig a little bit deeper into the positive things we have experienced from having our team organized in this way, I would like to just mention some downsides to this model. First, it creates much more overhead, which means more time spent on simply managing people's work and tasks, which is really good for me because that's what I do. Each week I spend maybe 2 hours a day just looking at our task tracker and making sure that tasks are written correctly so that people understand them, checking where on the server something is stored, planning new tasks for the next week, etc. Also, as this type of work creates much more dependencies outside of the team, it makes it more difficult to spread the right information to the right people. Which is why I spend so much time in meetings just making sure that people decide things and communicate the decisions. It can also mean that you sometimes are not aligned on priorities. Several projects might want to have assets at the same exact time, right now, which is something you obviously can't deliver all the time. So a part of my job is to say, no, we're going to do this first, you have to wait, this is more important, etc. You can also, if you're unlucky, become a little bit unsynced with the game teams. So the art team might be super fast and make a lot of assets, and then the game team doesn't have time to integrate them. The risk might even be that the assets are forgotten somewhere, and because they were made at a point where the right people to track this had their attention on something else. Anyway, let's move on to the positive things. The benefit of working together in an art pit is that we now have a much stronger team identity. Back when the artists were spread out in several different teams, there were often no real art identity, as they had no one to share their work with that had the similar type of experience as they do. So now, instead of possibly being the only person doing a specific type of job in one team, there are 15 artists and the art director, plus the 2 other teams, basically doing the same thing, sitting together. So our walls are now filled with sketches and scribbles and posters, and it's very, very messy. There are a lot of art books as well. We are no longer that artist in the team, we are now the art pit. Yeah, it's good. Another benefit of sitting together is that when you're surrounded by people doing the same thing as you, your possibilities to grow increases drastically. Everyone gets better at what they do because they get more feedback from their peers, their co-workers. They can see what the other artists are doing and working on, which tools they are using. Suddenly people are talking to each other about different shading techniques, or if it's a good idea to use outlines on the characters or not. Next to you sits another artist that you can share your work with, cooperate with, and talk to about art. And other stuff, of course. For us, it has also meant that we now can meet our goals of a more fast and efficient production of art assets. So what was almost impossible to do last year is now happening. And our new games, which I unfortunately can't talk that much about, are looking really nice. Damn it. To make this team setup work smoothly, we have a lead team in the studio art team. One person that belongs to the lead team is the art director, and it is the man in the picture. Our art director has 2 important roles. One, he is responsible for shaping and driving the artistic vision for all projects. This includes being part in meetings where important style shaping decisions are being made, finding technical solutions when it's needed, making sure that the artists aren't producing too many draw calls, or that the programmers integrate the art in an unintended way. Anything that would make the game prettier, more interesting and better in terms of art is his job. 2. He is responsible for endlessly rambling, drawing on the walls, chain smoking and repeatedly pointing out that he wants consistency. To achieve our goals, we also have 3 lead artists. The lead artists are the main contact point for each game project and is expected to know the project from inside and out. The lead should also understand the art director's vision so that it can be transferred into the project teams. And of course be a part of evolving the vision. Apart from this, they work closely with the artists, give feedback and provide guidance. And they also help me when I need more details added to my plans. Some days I feel like this constellation is a little bit like trying to steer a battleship in a storm while someone is attacking from the outside and your whole ship crew is drunk fighting each other. And some days it's great. So to conclude, basically what I do all day is to manage internal and external dependencies. This includes a lot of talking, writing emails, nagging people, planning, booking meetings, writing lists, looking angry, shouting at the art director, shouting again, telling my team to stop shooting with the Nerf guns, and running around in circles looking for people. The rest of the time I try to spend with the team. I try to make sure they are as happy as they can be and that they understand their assignments, that they get feedback from the right people and that they have the right tools they need in order to work. The third part of my job is to act as a translator for the art director, not because he doesn't speak English. Being a British guy, he's pretty good at that, but to actually try to translate his crazy rambling into digestible, real information that the artists can work with. So, the real question is, why are you here today? And what can you do to get the best out of your education and hopefully get to work with games? 1. Take your degree. It's still easier to get a job with a degree, not because you might need it in Sweden, but you might need it abroad. And it's not that easy to get a job in Sweden. If you consider moving to China, Germany, Indonesia or the UK, this is often a requirement if you don't have a massive work experience. In China, for instance, you need either a master's degree or a bachelor plus 2 years of work experience. Normally, if you have between 10 and 15 years, you can go and work wherever you want. But I suspect that that's not the case for most people in here. If you're an artist, your portfolio is key. And just like a teacher from this place told me, your portfolio is not better than the worst item in it. I've seen this being proved time and time again. So don't just keep stuff in there because you want to have more things in there. Instead, try to be creative and picky and productive. Choose only the best. The competition for artists is razor sharp. What I look at when I scan applications are, and in the following order: 1. The portfolio. 2. The CV, meaning do you have games experience, and I don't mean playing them. 3. If you have a games education. This is really a plus for me. I know it's not a big deal in the AAA industry, but as more and more people start having games education and start working with games, they also start caring about this stuff. Do an internship. To have experience from working in a professional environment is really important for anyone who wants to do this. This is a major part why I can do what I do today. And I know it's the same for many other people. This is especially important for those of you who want to work as designers or producers or any type of job that you can't really have a portfolio to show off. It could even be important for programmers, for instance, getting an interview. Because as a programmer you get to do a test anyway, so. But to even get the test, you might be good to have some experience. Make your own games. This is also a great way to learn, and you can have this in your portfolio. The people that I know from this education that does the coolest projects are most often the people who even started their own companies. If you're motivated by proper pay though, don't do this. Because it might be very, very tough in the beginning. And in the beginning, I mean the first 3 years maybe. And it's not like you earn a lot of money working with games in general. Like if you want to be rich, don't work with games. Next, stop complaining and take charge of your own future. There was and still is no producer track in this education, so pave your own road. What do you want to learn? What do you need to learn? What are you good at? Don't focus too much on what you suck at, but try to become even better at what you are good at instead. It doesn't mean that you should totally ignore your negative sides, but it means that you should try to niche yourself a little bit. I mean, in the end, you want to be a prospect of hiring, unless you're going to start your own company. But think about what you like to do and focus on yourself a little bit. So when something is fun, it's often something that you become better at, right? Be a little bit patient and a little bit humble. It takes time to become good at something. I really think it's a positive thing to be confident, but there's also nothing more annoying than an inexperienced person that thinks that he or she has learned everything there is to know already, because it's simply not even true. Don't limit yourself though. There are so many areas of game development. Clearly, it's easier to do something that is fairly common or much sought after, like programming. But there is more, so look for options that suits you specifically, rather than trying to do something that everyone else does. Be nice to each other. You will gain more from helping each other out than being mean to others. It might be very competitive out there, but this doesn't mean you should step all over your friends and colleagues to get somewhere. And be especially nice to your classmates, because you don't know, someday you might need to ask them for a job. Be prepared to live abroad. My boyfriend and I have made an Excel sheet with all the places we can imagine living in. The sheet calculates a livable factor that is based on what we like to do, how easy it is to get a job there, how safe it is, what kind of climate it has, and how far away from our families it is. This is, by the way, what happens when two producers decide to hook up. You spend your Saturday morning making Excel sheets for fun. And finally, be proud of all the games you make. I have worked on boring projects, I've had very boring work assignments, I worked on games I don't normally play, and with people I don't get along with that well. This is not an easy industry to get into, and I really don't recommend you to work for free, meaning doing internships for years and years while not getting paid, or while not studying. But I do recommend you to be patient with the projects you get to work on, because as long as you do something related to what you want to do, you will learn, and the more you will learn, the greater the chance to do something that is closer to what you dreamt of as a kid. Thank you! Questions? Yes, that is a unicorn. Sorry.
Question, man. When you worked at Seal, you had a sort of different position than you have now. You're our producer now, we're a more general producer then.
Mm-hmm.
When you spoke of accomplishing milestones and the like, how do you accomplish that specifically? Did you contact the people that were responsible for these things directly and ask them for updates, or did you check on their work progress directly, or?
I'm not sure I understand your question. So let me just try.
Yeah.
No, just repeat your question, but very short.
Okay. How did you do your job specifically while working at Seal?
So the milestone schedule is, how do I, okay. The milestone schedule, for instance, if that's what you're asking, is delivered from the publisher, sometimes. sometimes they deliver a vague description of what they kind of want you to do, and then you take that, you sit down with the leads from each department, and then you ask them, when do you think we can have this done? And they give you a vague answer, and then you plus 3 weeks on that and add it to the milestone schedule. Basically. No, there's a lot of talking back and forth with the other people in the team, of course. And then just writing, typing, sending it back to the publisher, see if they think it looks okay. Like a negotiation of the time, basically. And then if you actually manage to finish everything you set out to do, they pay you. So that's the goal, essentially. Yes?
What do you think is the most important thing to have in your portfolio? Like something specific you're looking for?
You can do it 2 ways. So I have to repeat the question, sorry. What should you have in your portfolio? As an artist, I assume. Yeah. So there are 2 types of portfolios, according to me. Either you can do a portfolio that is very specific towards working with a specific type of games. So if you want to work with casual games, you can go on only 2D, making, I don't know, specifically with characters, so very sort of framed in. Or you can do, if you have worked for a longer time, a portfolio that shows that you have a bigger range. So you can do illustrations and 3D, you can do UI, for instance. But it often depends on what type of job you're looking for. So for a general application, maybe it's better to have something a little bit more mixed. But if you specifically want to work as a UI artist in a casual games company, you should look at first what kind of games they have and see if this matches your style, because many artists also has like a personal style when they draw it. That was a very long answer. Did you understand? Was that good? Okay, thank you. Yes. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a question about tools you work with. Except for Excel sheet, do you use any other tools that would be invaluable to you as a producer? If you want to mention software or otherwise.
I'm having a lot of jokes in my head right now. I'm sorry. Yes, we have a task tracker at work. Normally, that's your best tool as a producer, I would say. So, in our case, we're using Jira, which is more like a bug tracker from the beginning. But many other in games company, I think it's fairly common to use Handsoft. But there's also this split of who hates it, who doesn't. I don't know. Jira I would not recommend though. It's not very good. Yes. Hi.
In a team like yours, which post is responsible for level design, and how does being a level designer differ from other posts?
We don't have any level designers at GameDuell actually, because we don't make those type of games. I'm not going to say that we're making Candy Crush, because we're not. But when you're making games like that, you don't really have that large of a need. And traditionally, we have also made a lot of card games. So I think we have more system designers, for instance, and people that are good at monetization models and so on. Boring. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned you were studying here. We do like a little bit of like Scrum and that type of thing, but I was wondering like how much do you need to understand about the other parts? Like you mentioned monetization just now, and, game design, and or do you have like a very specific specialization in management?
Yes, I do. But yeah, okay. So what do you? I'm so bad at this repeating thing. What do you know as a producer, or is that what you ask?
Yeah, basically.
Well, as a producer, you need to have more soft skills. So it's preferred if you're good with people and if you like to do a little bit of everything. I definitely think that it's necessary to be good at game design, or at least understand it in a theoretical way. Yes. From that, I would say that you learn when you work, so you have to be pretty good at like learning fast, because if you work with a very technical team, you're never going to understand completely what they're doing. But I mean, I for instance have also been the project manager for our engine team, so it's more how can you take your skill set and apply it to the situation that you're in, I would say, and then try to learn all the time.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh God. Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Hi. First, really interesting to hear about the producing and the way of that. But to talk a bit about meetings and pre-meetings and stuff, how do you approach it to not make the meetings go like to put too much time into the meetings and focus on the decision making? Because in my experience, meetings are quite toxic.
Yes, they are. So how do you make meetings efficient? I think partly it depends on who is holding the meeting. I'm very ruthless, so I interrupt people a lot and I physically tell people to shut up. That helps, but you can't always have people like that, of course. And then I think it also helps if you learn about, I mean, there's a lot of research about how to run a good meeting and so on. And I mean, most people in the room want to leave the room. So I think one of the most important things is to remind everyone, like, why are we in here right now? And then after 15 minutes, when you can tell that they're sort of starting to come out of that zone, you remind them again. So the goal was, but that's the thing, you need like a moderator to have a good meeting, I think. And often I do that, which it doesn't work out always, because if I get too also invested in what we're talking about, I tend to just, disappear.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? Thank you.
En,
Stuck in my mind.
en